All right, let's dive in. We're taking a deep dive into Project AQUILINE.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, Cold War intrigue, secret CIA projects, the whole nine
This
yards.
sounds right up our alley.
You know it. Declassified documents, fragments of information. We're trying to piece it all together and understand Project AQUILINE. Imagine, like a bird-shaped drone, totally autonomous, flying thousands of miles.
Seriously, like a robot bird spy.
Yep, dropping spy tech, loitering over targets for months. The CIA was thinking big back in the 60s.
That's wild. And I guess you brought me in to help connect the dots on this.
Well, you're the expert at unraveling these complex historical events.
Well, I'll do my best. So where do we even start with something like this?
Well, documents themselves, right. We got to start with what we know.
Yeah, makes sense. Lay the groundwork.
Exactly. So documents like the AQUILINE briefing statement and the Project AQUILINE Research and Development Study, they confirmed this thing existed.
Okay, so it wasn't just some, like, fever dream.
Definitely not. And they had big goals, let me tell you. They wanted a drone shaped like a bird.
Like to blend in, be stealthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Seamless blending with the environment. Advanced navigation, sensor deployment, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Staying over targets for, like, ridiculously long periods.
Ambitious, to say the least. And they actually thought they could pull this off back then.
Oh, they had a timeline and everything. The Project AQUILINE concept of operations document, they were aiming for operational readiness by 1971.
Wow. Just the technological leaps they were anticipating, it's mind-blowing. Talk about audacious.
Seriously. And during the height of the Cold War, too. Like going head-to-head with the Soviet Union and their tech.
Right. You gotta wonder, did they really think they could keep this whole thing under wraps? I mean, with everything else going on?
I know, right? But the amount of security-related documents is kind of crazy.
Oh, I bet. What, like super top secret stuff?
Beyond top secret even. Take the AQUILINE briefing statement, the AQUILINE security briefing, the security plan project recharter. They're all about keeping this thing locked down.
So like layers upon layers of secrecy.
Yes, strict access protocols, special approvals, need to know on a whole other level.
Whoa, they weren't messing around. What else? Did they have code names and secret handshakes?
Pretty much. Designated security staff at Area 51, separate locations for launch, control, recovery.
Like something out of a spy movie. So what was the big rush? Why all the secrecy and pressure?
Well, you have to remember the Cold War context. It was a crazy time, a constant battle for technological dominance.
Right, the U.S. and the Soviet Union always trying to one-up each other. High stakes, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's almost a miracle they made any progress at all, given the limitations back then.
Seriously, the tech was nowhere near what we have today. Like, what were they working with? Stone knives and bearskins.
Pretty much.
Ah.
The Project AQUILINE Research and Development Study, it lays out some of those challenges. Miniaturizing sensors, creating advanced navigation systems, even radioisotope engines. It's nuts.
Wow, radioisotope engines. That sounds kind of dangerous, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. But it shows how far they were willing to push things. And it's interesting how much of what they were working on back then is still relevant to modern drones.
Yeah, like they were dealing with miniaturization, power sources, navigation, all still huge issues today.
Totally. And what really blows my mind is their use of computer programs like for mission analysis and survivability studies. They were running simulations, which is like standard practice now, but back then, it's incredible.
It really is. Modeling and simulation, crucial for pushing tech boundaries then and now. But, you know, all this ambition had a price tag. Big one. And the documents show the constant struggle to balance those lofty goals with budget constraints and, let's face it, technical issues.
They were walking a tightrope for sure. All that initial optimism, the timeline, it crashed headfirst into reality.
Yeah, optimism only gets you so far, especially when you're dealing with experimental tech.
Exactly. The excerpt from Vehicle Platforms in the Office of Research and Development, it even mentions crashes during early flight tests. Not exactly a smooth start.
Ouch, yeah, that'll set you back. So what happened? Did they scrap the whole thing after that?
Well, there was pressure to keep going, you know, like a race against time. But the documents, Project AQUILINE and the Research and Development Study, they show the cost just kept climbing.
Money pit. Governments love those, don't they?
Sadly, it seems those challenges were just too much to overcome. Despite all their efforts, the project met a, well, less than glorious end.
Okay, so spill the beans. What happened? Did the bird drone ever actually fly?
Both Project AQUILINE and the Memorandum 4, Director of Planning, Programming, and Budgeting, regarding funding termination, they painted a pretty clear picture. Project terminated in 1971.
So that's it. Kaput. All that for nothing.
Pretty much. And the final price tag, $30 million.
Wow. $30 million in 1971. That's like a gazillion dollars today.
It really highlights the scale of this whole thing, right?
Right.
All that investment, all those hopes dashed.
It's kind of a bummer, actually. All that work and nothing to show for it.
Well, not entirely nothing. There's the request for funds for closeout of AQUILINE contract with McDonnell Douglas Astronautics Company. It shows they weren't just trying to bury the project. They wanted to salvage something.
Salvage? Like what? Scrap some metal and some blueprints?
More like the knowledge, the tech advancements. They knew, even in failure, there's value.
Yeah, I guess you learn more from your mistakes than your successes, right?
Exactly. It's that iterative process. Even if the initial goal isn't met, there's something to build on. AQUILINE might not have taken flight literally, but its legacy is there, especially in the field of drone technology.
It's like a stepping stone, a really expensive stepping stone.
You could say that. The advancements they made, miniaturized sensors, power sources, it all paved the way for the drones we see today.
So even though it failed, it wasn't a complete waste. Kind of a silver lining, I guess.
Definitely. And it's not just about the gadgets themselves. It's about understanding the challenges, learning from those failures. It's all part of pushing boundaries.
Makes you wonder what else is hidden in those declassified files. Maybe some other crazy projects.
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty more stories waiting to be uncovered. But
Yeah.
let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still got a lot more to dig into with Project AQUILINE.
Right, back to the bird drone. What else you got? I'm hooked.
Well, there's one interesting piece of the puzzle we haven't touched on yet. It involves other government agencies. Did they know about AQUILINE?
Ooh, intrigue. Were they in on the secret bird drone action?
We'll find out after the break. All right, so other government agencies. Did they know about AQUILINE?
That's the question, isn't it?
Well, the document titled Continued Classification, It Spills the Beans.
Hit me with it. What's the scoop?
Turns out quite a few agencies were briefed. ARPA, the Army, Navy, Marines, even the Air Force.
Wow, so AQUILINE wasn't exactly a solo mission for the CIA?
Not entirely. They were at least sharing the info.
I guess it makes sense. Something this big, you'd think they'd want input from other experts, right?
You'd think so. But here's the kicker. None of those agencies wanted to take over the entire project.
Really? Why not? Seems like something the military would jump at, a top-secret bird drone.
Well, according to the document, they deemed it, get this, too sophisticated for their drone-type operational requirements.
Too sophisticated? What does that even mean? Were they afraid of breaking it?
It's almost like AQUILINE was just too far ahead of its time. The other agencies weren't ready for that level of tech.
Makes you wonder about the CIA's role, right? They were willing to take the risk, push the boundaries.
Yeah, they were like the venture capitalists of the intelligence world, always looking for that next big thing.
And sometimes those ventures pay off. Sometimes they crash and burn. Speaking of crashes, let's get back to the bird drone itself. We were talking about the tech before the break.
Right, the engine, the crashes, all that fun stuff. It's amazing they even tried to build something so advanced back in the 60s.
I know, right? Today, drones are everywhere, but back then, it was a totally different story.
The Project AQUILINE Research and Development Study really breaks down the core elements of the project. Propulsion, navigation, sensors, comms. They were tackling some serious challenges.
And trying to make it all work together seamlessly, thousands of miles away from any controllers, it was ambitious, to say the least.
What always gets me is the engine. What were they thinking of using to power this thing? Were they going with standard fuel or something more exotic?
They explored a bunch of different options: internal combustion, fuel cells, even, get this, radioisotope engines?
Radioisotope engines. That's like nuclear powered, right?
Pretty much. The idea was to have a drone with virtually unlimited range, staying airborne for months.
Months. Seriously. That's crazy.
Yeah, the documents mention a projected range of over 6,000 nautical miles for the radioisotope version.
That's enough to circle the globe. It's mind-boggling they thought they could pull that off.
Well, they were aiming for persistent surveillance, a drone that could just stay up there indefinitely. Ambitious doesn't even begin to describe it.
And we all know how that turned out. Pushing boundaries like that usually comes with a few, shall we say, bumps in the road.
You're talking about the crashes, right?
Oh, yeah. Getting that bird drone off the ground reliably was a major headache. The excerpt from vehicle platforms in the Office of Research and Development mentions crashes during those early flight tests.
Makes sense, I guess. When you're dealing with experimental tech, things are bound to go wrong.
True. But were there design flaws? Were they on the right track with that bird-shaped concept?
They had their share of issues, that's for sure. And the crashes weren't limited to the early prototypes.
They kept crashing, even with the later models.
Yeah, there's one incident Detailed in that same document, the excerpt from Vehicle Platforms in the Office of Research and Development happened at China Lake, California. A test flight gone wrong.
What happened? Another crash.
Yep, a big one. They had all these fancy facilities, a confident team, and then boom, the drone goes down.
Ouch. What caused it? Did they ever figure that out?
It's not entirely clear from the documents, but they had to analyze everything, the flight data, autopilot, schematics, the whole shebang, just to try and understand what went wrong.
Talk about a setback. Did they ever pinpoint the cause?
They don't say, but the fallout is pretty clear. There were arguments, finger-pointing. Some wanted more control over the contractor, McDonnell Douglas. Others wanted to stay the course.
So even with all the crashes, the technical issues, there was internal conflict. That had to make things even more difficult.
Imagine the pressure. Cutting-edge tech, budget constraints, internal disagreements. It's a wonder they got anything done at all.
Okay, so we've talked about the engine, the crashes. What about the rest of the tech? Like the sensors? What kind of intel were they trying to gather with this bird drone?
They wanted a versatile platform, something that could do it all. Photographic, infrared, ELIN, even audio. They even talked about droppable payloads, like little black boxes full of spy tech.
Wow, a one-stop shop for all your spying needs. But all that equipment must have added weight, complexity. How do they plan on navigating and controlling this thing, especially over thousands of miles?
That was the million-dollar question. They looked into all sorts of navigation systems, check roadie, radio direction finding, even using satellites. It was the cutting edge of navigation tech for the time.
And I bet none of it worked perfectly. We take GPS for granted today, but back then, it must have been a nightmare.
Yeah, they were pushing the limits. The documents mention testing and evaluation of all these systems, but it's not clear if they found a perfect solution. Navigating an autonomous drone over that distance, it was a huge challenge.
And then there's the communication aspect.
Yeah.
How do you control a drone and receive data from it when it's thousands of miles away?
Traditional line-of-sight comms were out of the question. They looked into satellite relays, even using the drone itself as a communication node, relaying data between other drones or ground stations.
Wait, so they were thinking about a network of drones, like interconnected, sharing data, extending their range.
Exactly. It was a precursor to the drone swarms we see in development today. They were way ahead of their time in that regard.
So they had this grand vision, these groundbreaking ideas, but they kept running into roadblocks. The tech wasn't quite there, the costs were spiraling. It's the classic story of ambition meeting reality, right?
It happens to the best of us. You push the limits, you fail, you learn, you push further. But those failures, they come at a cost, both in terms of time and money.
And we know that AQUILINE wasn't exactly cheap, $30 million at the time of cancellation. What was their budget like throughout the project?
It wasn't small, that's for sure. The Project AQUILINE Research and Development Study mentions a budget of over $4 million for fiscal year 1967.
$4 million in 1967 dollars. That's got to be like a gazillion dollars today.
And that was just for research and development. Building and deploying an operational fleet of these bird drones would have cost way more.
No wonder financial pressure played a role in the project's demise. It's like they were constantly fighting an uphill battle. Technical challenges, budget constraints, internal disagreements. It's a lot for any project to handle.
It's almost like the project was cursed from the start. But there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about yet, the operational side of things.
Right. How are they planning on actually using this thing? What were the missions, the targets?
That's what we're going to dive into next. The operational challenges, the intended uses, the real-world applications of this Cold War bird drone.
All right, we're back for the final part of our AQUILINE deep dive. We've seen the ambition, the tech, the setbacks, but what ultimately brought this whole thing crashing down?
It was a whole bunch of things, really, like a perfect storm, you know?
Right.
The documents tell the story.
Yeah, shifting priorities, the sheer complexity of the project, and let's not forget the money.
Right, that $30 million price tag when they pulled the plug. Oof.
Yeah, that memorandum for Director of Planning, Programming, and Budgeting about the funding termination, it's like a death knell.
It wasn't just the overall cost, though, right? It was the constant struggle to stay on budget.
Always overspending, always needing more. Those conversations probably weren't fun.
Yeah, imagine trying to explain that. Oh, yeah, we need another couple million. The bird drone needs a new beak.
Uh-huh, I bet. And then there's the tech itself. Was it even feasible back then?
Well, that excerpt from Vehicle Platforms in the Office of Research and Development document, it really lays it out.
All those crashes, the constant struggle to make it reliable.
Ouch.
They were pushing the limits,
Yeah.
you know? Miniaturized sensors, advanced navigation, that crazy propulsion system, it was a lot to ask.
Almost like they were trying to do too much, too soon. Reach for the stars and tripped over their own feet.
Yeah, the tech wasn't quite there yet. But it wasn't just that. There was also a lack of direction, you know.
Right. The disagreements within the CIA itself.
That same document, the excerpt from vehicle platforms, it hints at some serious internal conflict.
Some wanted more control over McDonnell Douglas, the contractor. Others wanted to let them do their thing. Tough situation. Yeah, such an ambitious project, pushing the limits, all that money, and then you throw in internal fighting. Recipe for disaster.
And all this happening during the Cold War, too. The Soviets breathing down their necks, that pressure had to be immense.
Right. They needed to prove their worth, show results, justify the investment. It's easy to see how things could get rushed.
Cutting corners, maybe even overlooking problems just to keep moving forward. High stakes, high pressure.
The CIA was playing for keeps. And sometimes, you just got to fold your hand.
So AQUILINE's downfall, it wasn't one thing, it was everything. The cost, the tech, the infighting, the Cold War pressure.
A perfect storm, like you said. A tragedy of ambition and circumstance.
But even in failure, there's got to be some value, right? Lessons learned.
Oh, absolutely. Remember that request for funds for closeout of AQUILINE contract with McDonnell Douglas Astronautics Company?
Yeah, they weren't just shutting it down, they were trying to salvage something.
Exactly. The knowledge, the tech advancements, even if the project failed, those things still have value.
Smart move. Recognizing that even in the ashes, there's something to be found.
Innovation. It's not a straight line, It's messy. There are setbacks. The important thing is to learn from them. Keep moving forward.
So what are the big takeaways here? What can we learn from AQUILINE, this Cold War dream that never really took flight?
Well, first, balance. You need to balance ambition with realism, innovation with responsibility. They aimed high, but didn't account for all the practical challenges.
And leadership, too. Having a clear vision, a unified team, that's crucial.
Right. Otherwise, even the best ideas get lost in the chaos.
But even when we fall short, there's that human ingenuity, that drive to keep pushing, keep learning.
AQUILINE might have failed, but it paved the way for the drones we have today. In a way, it succeeded through its failure.
And I think there's a bigger lesson here, too. History, it's not just dry facts and dates, It's about people, ambition, ingenuity, resilience.
People who dare to dream big, push the boundaries. Even if they don't always reach their goals, they change the world.
That's a great point. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Project AQUILINE. Secret CIA projects, Cold War intrigue, a bird-shaped drone that never quite flew. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it has. Who knew a failed project could be so fascinating?
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this journey, folks. We hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep those brains buzzing.
I would have been on top of the charts, but it's politics. You do some gimmick shit and post, you get a lot of clicks. Drop some real shit and they probably won't acknowledge it.